November 22nd, 1963, Dallas, Texas. A motorcade glides through Dealey Plaza. A smiling young president waves to the cheering crowd. Moments later, gunfire shatters the air. The dream of a new America collapses in an instant. But who was John Fitzgerald Kennedy before that tragic day? What forged his ideals, his charisma, his vision of a new frontier? John F. Kennedy, 35th President of the United States. A leader who inspired hope, confronted Cold War fears, and redefined modern politics. His story begins not in the chaos of Dallas, but decades earlier, in the privileged but turbulent world of an Irish-American dynasty. The Kennedys were not ordinary immigrants. Joseph Patrick Kennedy, JFK's father, was the son of Irish Catholics who had faced discrimination in Boston. Determined to rise above prejudice, Joe built a vast fortune in banking, stocks, and film. By the 1930s, he was one of the richest men in America. From the beginning, the Kennedy children were groomed for power. Discipline, ambition, and loyalty were demanded in the Kennedy household. Joseph's dream was simple. One of his sons would become president. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, born May 29, 1917, in Brookline, Massachusetts, was the second son. Frail, often sick, and overshadowed by his older brother Joe Jr., Jack, as he was called, seemed an unlikely candidate for greatness. Jack's childhood was marked by illness. He suffered from scarlet fever, chronic back pain, and what doctors later suspected was Addison's disease. Yet these struggles forged resilience. While bedridden, he devoured history books. He studied leaders, wars, and revolutions, lessons that would later shape his worldview. At Choate, a prestigious boarding school, Jack stood out less for sports and more for intellect and charm. Teachers remembered his sharp wit and restless curiosity. He wrote essays questioning authority, showing early signs of a mind unafraid of bold ideas. In 1937, the Kennedys moved to London, where Joseph served as U.S. ambassador to Britain. Jack, then a teenager, witnessed the looming shadow of World War II. He studied international politics firsthand, meeting leaders, observing tensions, and realizing the fragility of peace. At Harvard, Jack's passion for foreign policy deepened. His senior thesis, later published as the book Why England Slept, analyzed Britain's failure to prepare for Nazi aggression. It revealed a young man already thinking like a statesman. World events soon tested him personally. In 1941, the United States entered World War II. Jack, despite chronic health problems, volunteered for the Navy. Assigned to command a patrol torpedo boat, PT-109, in the Pacific, he faced his first true trial. In August 1943, PT-109 was rammed by a Japanese destroyer. Jack led his surviving crew through treacherous waters, towing an injured man by holding a strap in his teeth. For days, they survived on coconuts until rescue came. Kennedy returned home a war hero, but at great physical cost. The Kennedy legacy was now tied to sacrifice, but tragedy soon struck. In 1944, Joe Jr., the brother destined for the presidency, was killed in a bombing mission over Europe. Joseph Kennedy's hopes shifted to his second son, Jack. From the shadow of illness, from the burden of family expectation, John F. Kennedy emerged, a reluctant heir who would soon step into the world of politics, driven by both duty and destiny. In 1946, the young war hero stepped into the political arena. John F. Kennedy ran for Congress in Massachusetts' 11th District. His campaign was fueled by family wealth, relentless energy, and a charm that made him stand out from seasoned politicians. Kennedy's grassroots strategy was simple but effective. Shake every hand, meet every voter, and connect with personal warmth. His sisters and brothers canvassed neighborhoods, while his mother hosted teas to rally support. Voters saw not just a wealthy aristocrat, but a relatable young veteran. He won his first race easily, serving 3 terms in the House. But Kennedy wasn't content. In 1952, he challenged Henry Cabot Lodge Jr., a Republican titan, for a Senate seat. Against the odds, Jack won, proving that the Kennedy name was now a force in American politics. In 1953, Kennedy married Jacqueline Bouvier, a stylish young journalist. Together, they became America's glamorous new couple. Jackie's elegance softened Jack's ambition. and the pair captured the imagination of a generation hungry for fresh faces. But behind the image of vigor lay constant pain. Kennedy underwent risky spinal surgeries, at one point receiving Catholic last rites. Despite illness, he wrote Profiles in Courage, a Pulitzer Prize-winning book about senators who defied party and popularity for principle. It revealed not just ambition, but his deep admiration for political bravery. By 1960, Kennedy set his sights on the presidency. Many thought he was too young, too inexperienced, and most dangerously too Catholic. Would Americans trust a man whose faith might be influenced by the Pope? Kennedy tackled this head-on, declaring, "I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute." The campaign blazed with energy. Kennedy's opponent was Richard Nixon, Eisenhower's vice president, older, seasoned, confident. The race was tight, but the defining moment came with the first-ever televised presidential debates. On screen, Kennedy appeared calm, youthful, and charismatic. Nixon, pale and sweating under the hot lights, looked nervous. For radio listeners, the debate seemed even. For television viewers, Kennedy won by a landslide. The age of media politics had begun, and JFK was its first master. On November 8, 1960, Kennedy narrowly defeated Nixon, becoming the youngest elected president at 43. For millions, it felt like a new era, an age of possibility. Kennedy's inaugural address electrified the world. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. His call to service became a generation's anthem. He spoke of a new frontier, a nation ready to fight poverty, explore space, and stand firm against tyranny. But inspiration met hard reality. The world was locked in the Cold War, a high-stakes struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. Kennedy inherited crises that threatened not just his presidency, but humanity itself. In April 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion became his first major test. A CIA-backed force of Cuban exiles attempted to overthrow Fidel Castro. The operation collapsed in disaster. Kennedy accepted full responsibility, his image shaken, his enemies emboldened. Yet he learned from failure. Determined never to be misled again, Kennedy grew more cautious with military advice, more skeptical of intelligence agencies. His next battles with the Soviets would show a leader tempered by hard lessons. The stage was set for the most dangerous confrontation of the Cold War. The fate of the world would soon hang on Kennedy's shoulders. October 1962. American spy planes capture photographs of Soviet missile sites under construction in Cuba. Nuclear war just 90 miles from U.S. shores. The Cuban Missile Crisis had begun. For 13 days, the world stood still. Kennedy faced an impossible choice: strike the sites and risk all-out war, or allow nuclear weapons in Cuba and appear weak. The Pentagon pressed for invasion. Hawks in Congress demanded action. Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, warned of retaliation. Kennedy chose a third path. On October 22nd, he addressed the nation, revealing the missile threat to the world. Calm, firm, and unflinching, he announced a naval quarantine of Cuba. No Soviet ships carrying weapons would be allowed through. As warships steamed toward each other, the globe held its breath. One wrong move could mean annihilation. Behind closed doors, Kennedy opened secret back channels, trading quiet diplomacy for time. On October 28th, Khrushchev agreed to withdraw the missiles. In return, Kennedy pledged not to invade Cuba and secretly agreed to remove U.S. missiles from Turkey. The crisis ended, not with fire, but with restraint. Kennedy's handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis transformed his image. From youthful novice, he became a seasoned statesman. More importantly, he had prevented nuclear war. Out of this near catastrophe came a new push for peace. A hotline was installed between Washington and Moscow. And in 1963, Kennedy signed the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, the first major arms control agreement of the Cold War. But while Kennedy managed global dangers, another crisis brewed at home. The struggle for civil rights was reaching its breaking point. Across the South, segregation, voter suppression, and racial violence scarred the nation's conscience. At first, Kennedy tread cautiously. He feared alienating Southern Democrats, whose votes he needed in Congress. But brutal images of police dogs and fire hoses turned caution into conviction. Kennedy realized civil rights was not just a political issue, it was a moral one. On June 11, 1963, Kennedy delivered a historic address. We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the scriptures and as clear as the American Constitution. For the first time, a president fully embraced the cause of racial equality. That same year, violence in Birmingham, Alabama, shocked the nation. 4 African-American girls were killed in a church bombing. The tragedy deepened Kennedy's resolve to push civil rights legislation through Congress. He introduced what would later become the Civil Rights Act, though he would not live to see its passage. Amid crisis and conflict, Kennedy also looked upward, to space. In 1961, he had declared the goal of landing a man on the moon before the decade's end. His vision was bold, to prove America's leadership not only on Earth, but beyond it. NASA's Apollo program was launched, setting humanity on course for the stars. By 1963, Kennedy had grown. No longer the cautious young politician, he had faced down nuclear war, embraced civil rights, and ignited the space race. He was not a perfect leader, but he was a president who dared to confront the greatest challenges of his time. The nation believed it had found its compass, but history had one final, cruel twist to deliver. November 22, 1963, Dallas, Texas. The sun was bright, the mood was festive. Thousands lined the streets to see their young president. John F. Kennedy rode through Dealey Plaza, smiling, waving, his final moments alive. At 12:30 p.m., shots rang out. Panic erupted. Kennedy collapsed into Jackie's arms, his head fatally struck. The motorcade sped to Parkland Hospital, but within 30 minutes, the president was pronounced dead. America was in shock. Hope had been silenced by gunfire. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, sworn in aboard Air Force One, became president just hours later. Jackie, still in her blood-stained pink suit, stood beside him. The image seared itself into history, a symbol of grief and resilience. The nation wept. Millions lined up in Washington to pay respects as Kennedy's casket lay in state at the Capitol. On live television, the world watched Jackie Kennedy, veiled in black, lead her children to the funeral procession. 3-year-old John Jr. saluted his father's coffin, a gesture that broke the nation's heart. For days, America stood frozen in sorrow. Commentators spoke of a lost innocence. It felt as if the country had stepped out of a dream and into a darker, harsher reality. The accused assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, was captured the same day. But before he could stand trial, nightclub owner Jack Ruby shot him on live television. Conspiracy theories flourished. Was it the Soviets, the CIA, organized crime? The Warren Commission later concluded that Oswald acted alone. Yet doubts linger to this day. Kennedy's presidency lasted barely 1,000 days, but its impact endures. His vision of a new frontier inspired Americans to see public service as a noble calling. The Peace Corps, created under his leadership, continues to send volunteers across the globe. His bold commitment to space exploration set NASA on course for the moon landing in 1969. When Neil Armstrong planted the American flag on lunar soil, it was Kennedy's words that echoed, "We choose to go to the moon." His Civil Rights Bill, introduced in 1963, was passed under Lyndon Johnson as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, one of the most significant laws in American history. Today, Kennedy rests in Arlington National Cemetery. At his grave burns the eternal flame, lit by Jackie Kennedy. It remains a beacon of remembrance, a reminder of promise unfulfilled. For many, John F. Kennedy symbolizes youth, courage, and hope. A leader cut down at the height of his power. He asked Americans not what their country could do for them, but what they could do for their country. He challenged humanity to look beyond fear, beyond war, beyond Earth itself. And though his presidency was brief, John F. Kennedy's story is eternal. This was the story of John F. Kennedy. If this journey through history moved you, help us keep telling these stories. Like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the lives that shaped our world. And let us know in the comments, which moment of John F. Kennedy's life inspires you most?